Hi everyone, this is Dr. Mike, but this is not a Saving Savvy episode. This is an episode actually directed towards physicians, specifically psychiatrists who are interested in or are currently doing telepsychiatry, which is, of course, the ability to see patients in a remote location using an audio and video link. Now, my journey in telepsychiatry started sometime last year when an organization wanted me to do some work for them. And because they were far away, they were agreeable to setting up a telepsych station in my home. So my background as a psychiatrist goes beyond 30 years, but I'm also a videographer, a photographer, and a podcaster. And I've done some of that work professionally, so I have a background in those areas which I think can enhance the telepsychiatry experience. Being kind of a nerd, I know a little bit about computers, and I was able to work closely with the organization's IT staff, and they've proven to be just super awesome and super helpful, and they've taught me a lot along the way. So whether you're using Skype with a paying patient or an elaborate setup, I think you're going to find something in this talk useful, hopefully anyways. So let's look at some pictures. So this first picture is of me going down on my first day to practice telepsychiatry. And you can see a couple of things. One is that I'm wearing jeans and fuzzy slippers because no one sees you below the waist. The other thing is I decided to kind of wear a uniform every day. So instead of the usual shirt and tie, I'm wearing a casual shirt and a lab coat with the idea that this would make me appear more approachable, but yet it would identify me. The other thing is that I'm going down into my basement, and I'm fortunate to have some finished rooms in the basement that are virtually unused by my family. So that is a thing for you to think of too. Are you or do you have a space that's somewhat private, and if you have a more elaborate setup, a place where you can leave your equipment set up? Now, people will think of, well, I'll use my bedroom or the kitchen. If you're going to do those things, you want to block the view. No one needs to see your bed or your dirty dishes in the sink. This is a picture out of my front door on the first day that I practiced telepsychiatry, and you can see that there are definitely reasons to work from home. This next shot is a wide shot of my setup. It certainly shows that I'm in my basement, but it shows a couple of other things too. The organization provided the vast majority of equipment, but I had to provide the tables, and my whole setup is based on folding tables and other junk that I found in the basement. But I arranged it in an L-like fashion, and it's turned out to be amazingly efficient. You'll also notice that there's a screen behind my station, and that folding screen is there for a reason. It's there to provide a pleasant background, but it's also hiding a bunch of storage cabinets. This is a close-up of that screen, and you can see a couple of other things. First, there's a fake plant that's sitting on a cardboard box with a placemat on it. But in the framing, it looks pretty nice, and you don't see all that stuff. Also, on the top of the screen, you can see a light. That's simply one of those hardware store lamps that you clamp onto things, and I'm using an LED bulb that I had around the house, and as the diffuser, I'm actually using a cut-up plastic grocery bag. So that whole setup costs about $10 for that lamp, and it serves as a hair light or rim light to light the back of me to give me definition between myself and the screen, and it also shines to the left of me and then shines back at my face as a fill light as it bounces back from the wall in front of me. Here's a picture of me sitting at the station, and if you look directly forward, that's an actual dedicated video phone. It's a system called the Cisco Telepresence System, and my particular unit is called the EX90. It does an excellent job. I'll be talking more about that later. But so I have this kind of high-level system that works very well, but you might have a lesser system that might work just fine too. On the other end, this is where the patient's sitting. And there's a big screen TV of me, and on top of that TV is another telepresence unit, a different one that's totally compatible with mine. And I'm able to control the camera on that particular distant unit. I can focus it, I can zoom in, I can move the camera, so it's pretty cool. At that desk, you would have my nurse, who has been invaluable to me. She has a computer so she can look up stuff and do things, and I can also communicate with her via instant messaging. And there's also a speakerphone in that room that we can use in emergencies. So let's go through each part of my setup in detail so you get a better understanding of what I have, and you can see if that applies to you. So this with the arrow on it is just simply a printer. It has two trays in it. One tray has prescription paper because on rare occasion I still have to use a paper script. It also has a scanner on the top, and that scanner connects to my computer in a soft fax way so I can actually send and receive faxes via my computer. This next little arrow points towards a headphone and basically a headset, which is a earplug or earphone and a microphone. And I'm using a USB one, and so if you are using a headset, I would definitely recommend using a USB one. They vary in prices. Mine was very cheap. I actually had one around the house. I think it was less than $20, and it does a great job, and it's used in multiple applications. The picture after that is my computer. So to comment about my computer, this is a computer that supplied me, and I have to take that to me when I actually do go to their on-site places once a week. However, this is a business-grade computer, so how is that different? On the bottom of the computer, it has a connector, and I can push that connector onto what's called a base station, and all of my other peripherals are connected. So I'm not on the floor connecting the monitor and my keyboard and the mouse and my headset and all that sort of stuff. It's just click, and I'm ready to go. If you look at that computer, there's a few other things that you need to understand about it. It's running a tremendous amount of software at the same time. So it's running that soft fax program. I also have a soft telephone on it. I'm running Dragon, which is a dictation software, which is really very labor intensive on the computer. I'm running an EMR. I'm running a separate prescribing program. I'm running Outlook and other office software. I'm running an instant messaging software. So there's a lot going on. And when we first started using the computer in this remote way, it would just freeze and crash. And so IT provided some information, and then they came up with the ultimate solution, which is they replaced my original computer, which looked just like this one, with this computer. What's the difference? This computer has a solid state hard drive, which is much faster and can keep up with all that different stuff. So if you're having an unsatisfactory result, what you may want to look at is your computer fast enough, or is it tweaked in the right way? Moving along, the next picture is just of a basket, and that's where I have to put all my paper that needs to be shredded. And there's a shredder down there too, because of course you have to be HIPAA compliant no matter where you are. This is just my monitor, and that's kind of my brain of the area, because on that monitor I'm getting all my information, the past record, instant messaging, emails, you name it, it's all coming up on that monitor, which is separate from the monitor that I'm using to view the patient. I think that's really critical, to have it separate, or to have a monitor that's big enough that you really have a lot of real estate on it. If you're trying to do everything on a 15-inch laptop, and if you're using anything more than the most simple solution, you're going to be very, very unhappy. And it really pays to invest a little money in having a big amount of screen to look at. Okay, moving along. This next arrow points to something that you can't see. But it points to something that I can talk about. And that is some of the electronics that's driving all this. So I have cable modem coming in here, and this is a different line than my family system. And in fact, it's a business level internet connection, which makes it just a little more stable and functions a little better. And by having this separate from my regular family system, I don't care if my kids are streaming on Netflix, because it's not going to impact my connection. I'm very lucky that my organization that hired me is paying for this, and so I get to do this. And what they have next to it is a special box that allows me to connect directly to their network. So if you're doing any kind of remote work and you want a secure line, there's a couple ways to do it. One way is to have what's called a VPN, or a virtual private network. And that establishes a tunnel, if you want to think of it, between your computer and the corporate network. But that has to encode information for security and then decode it on the other end, and it can be a little slow. Now, I do have that set up if I need it, but I don't normally use it because I actually have a direct connection to their network, which these great IT people set up. So it looks like I'm actually one of their sites. I'm a site of one, but it looks like I'm just like one of their other buildings according to the network, and that provides all sorts of advantages. The other thing that you don't see here is an uninterrupted power supply, or a UPS. And that was an actual afterthought, because what would happen is I would have a momentary power failure, everything would go down, and I'd have to reboot everything, and that eliminates that. And it's very inexpensive. Okay, moving along. I don't know if you can see this or not, but there's actually two video cameras on top of this video phone. One is the little round silver one, and that's actually the dedicated camera to the video phone. It is really excellent. It's very high definition. It works just great. But there's also a little webcam next to it. Now, if you are going to use a webcam, I would definitely recommend using an external one, and I would recommend using one of the better ones from Logitech. Those are the best webcams that are out there. The one from your computer is pretty crummy. And that particular webcam is there for another reason. About 90% of what I do is from my video phone to that setup that you saw in the other picture. But maybe 8 or 10% is to a jail. Now, that jail does not have this fancy setup that I'm able to use through the organization. And in fact, I didn't even know what they had set up because it wasn't very good. To reach that particular population, we use some software called WebEx, which actually works pretty well. But the problem that I had was that the audio was so bad when talking to an inmate that it was unusable. And they had this setup where they did courthouse to jail stuff, and I'm sure it was fine for that, but certainly not good enough to do a psych eval. So I think their IT staff is a little thinner as far as the amount of people than ours, and we really couldn't get much going on. And so finally I had one of the mental health caseworkers describe what she was seeing, and I kind of guided her around this setup. And it turns out that what they had was a monitor, and plastered on the back of the monitor was this little mini PC that had a free USB port. And what they were using on the top of the monitor was a very cheap webcam with a built-in microphone. And so you take that cheap microphone, you bounce it around a room with a lot of hard walls, you have the patient sitting around 10 feet or so away from it, and it was an impossible situation. But it was easily remedied by just having them plug in a very inexpensive desktop USB microphone. So here again, sometimes the simplest solutions can take an impossible situation and turn it into a possible one, but you've got to ask for it, and you've got to kind of do a little bit of investigative work. This is just my video phone again. It's really great. With this particular phone, I don't have to use my little headpiece, my little headset. But when I'm doing stuff through the jail, I'd use that headset again. So I'm using that headset for dictation, I'm using it for my soft telephone, and I'm using it for when I'm on the WebEx system. But my other dedicated system is so good that no one has to use anything. We can just talk back and forth. All right, moving on to the next thing, what you can see is my video light. So now, remember, I've already indicated that I have two lighting sources. I have that backlight that lights up my hair, and then it bounces off the wall and flashes kind of back on me, giving me what's called a fill light. This light here is just a light, very inexpensive, that you would use on a video camera, and that's what you call is my key light. So that's the main light to my face. It works great, and so I have a balanced 3-point lighting system. And why would I go to such trouble to do that? Because it makes my camera work more efficiently, I'm not dropping frames, and it just looks better on the other end. If you've ever looked at bad video, like a bad Skype video where it's all not only jerky, but the person looks like they're embalmed, it's worthwhile to spend a little time coming up with a lighting system, and it doesn't have to be expensive at all. All right, this next picture is of a phone. I know that's very exciting, but this is actually a phone to my regular phone system, and I have it here to show you a couple of things. And that is, it's always a good idea to have backups. So although my system works great about 98% of the time, about 2% of the time, it doesn't work very well, and maybe the audio drops out, and I'm unable to get a lot of information from my patient. So in cases like that, the nurse on the other end will use just the regular phone that she has on speakerphone and dial my home phone, which I'll do on speakerphone, and although it's not high fidelity, I certainly can hear my patient. And this is another wide view to show a few other things. One is that I have my ancient fax machine here. So this is about a 25-year-old fax machine that was sitting in the basement and not being used. But I have it connected up to my own phone line because it's frankly a lot easier to fax something with a fax machine than it is to use the soft fax. Unfortunately, this fax machine is very old and it only works about maybe 70% of the time. So I try the fax machine once, and if it doesn't work, then I go to the high-tech solution. I also want you to note that there's a little box there with all sorts of paper information and little sheets and prescription pads and all that, and pens and all that sort of stuff. And that's there because it's easy for me to reach things. Remember, you're on camera. So normally if you were in your private practice office, it would be no problem for you to bend over and get something. But no one wants to see your backside on TV. So that's my setup. I hope you find it helpful. Maybe you got an idea or two. A couple things that I would point out is that sometimes very simple solutions can result in dramatic improvement in your telepsychiatry experience. The other thing is look at your background, see if it's appropriate, and look at your lighting too to see if it's appropriate and lighting you properly. These are very simple solutions that can make a dramatic difference in your work and how you're perceived on the other end. Also, if that other end setup is done up properly, you're going to see the person much better, you're going to hear them better, and that's going to make 8 hours of telepsychiatry work tolerable. It could be pretty intolerable if it's all goofy and blurry. Well, so I hope you like this. If you are interested, I also have a podcast that I do with my wife, who's a clinical psychologist. It's called Psychiatric Secrets Revealed with Dr. Mike. The Dr. Mike is just there because she kind of joined the podcast later on, but she's Dr. Julie, and so that's available. And if you like this channel, there's all kind of other interesting stuff on it. Not a lot about psychiatry, though. Take care.